Next part I want to talk about is how irresponsible journalism can help to marginalize people. Now, this isn't necessarily all, my original idea. I mean, I'm not saying that the last part was all my original idea either, but one of the people that you should follow is the account called The Conscious Lee. He does a lot of good talks for people who might not understand stuff about marginalized folks. And again, like, as with when I say things, you're not going to agree with everything I say. You might not agree with everything that he says, but he there was some Obama tweet that he had a problem with, but there's a particular issue with how the media words about when people die, especially violent deaths, how they word it when, like, marginalized people die versus when, like, white people die. And in this particular case, in one of the examples that I'm using, it's that whole scenario of Jewish people get the benefit of white privilege except for when they don't. So it's like Christians get to will play up to Jews, and will say, hey, we love the Jewish people, until they don't love the Jewish people, until they want to be anti-Semitic. But anyway, so what we have here, let's flip over to the alternate scene, is we have the Conscious Lead, and had a video about Obama's tweet about Israel and Palestine is a problem. But the part that I'm playing here is about words having meanings, and it's he replayed somebody else's, I think, video. I don't know if it's a TikTok or whatever, but he was replaying somebody else's video about language, and the language that's being used when it comes to how they report marginalized people being killed versus other people being killed. So we're going to watch this for a few seconds, and I'm not going to interrupt it or pause it. I'm going to let her have her say, and then we'll talk about it.
Yes, language is important. When I say it though, let's really get more context from this communications expert. Take it away.
And that is my area of expertise, which is communications. And I want to talk about two words, and those words are killed and the word death. And I want to talk about how language shapes narratives. When we talk about a conflict, an armed conflict, people make the assumption that both sides are equally as tooled and have the exact same resources. And not only that, but that the risks and the liabilities are the same. So when we see the word conflict, we make assumptions about power balances and not power imbalances. So when we have international news media, particularly news outlets in the West, characterizing the casualties from one group as from them being killed versus another group from them just dying, dead, it always sends up a little flare in the back of my mind. Because this is the difference between active voice and passive voice. Israelis are being killed while Palestinians just die. Utilization of the word killed is an action word. It requires an actor versus somebody that is acted upon. Whereas the word dead is just a state of being. We're by and large not looking for perpetrators. We're by and large not looking for context. Death is just what happens, right? And I'm always wary when I see a political narrative being orchestrated to present one group of people for whom the consequences of being alive is merely death. Like, that's just what happens. Particularly when we already represent these groups of people as equally tooled and capable of violence.
All right, so that's her points. Now, I don't necessarily totally agree with the ideas being set forth on whether or not, it's relevant if people are equally tooled of violence, simply because of the fact that, just because one isn't equally tooled of violence, it doesn't necessarily mean that one isn't being or capable of violence. But it doesn't make the violence any less wrong. But that's not really the point of the video there. The main point of the video is that how we talk about the harms and the wrongs that happen to people, is that, are you really talking about it happening to people, or is it just a state of being? Like, Palestinians are dead versus Israelis were killed or murdered. So if we flip back over here, what's an example of this? So CBS News, hundreds feared dead in Gaza hospital blast as Israeli-Palestinian officials trade accusations. So what she said here, not hundreds of Palestinians are killed in when a bomb fell on the hospital, when an explosion, when an explosion, whatever. Hundreds feels dead in Gaza hospital blast. So they're dead. They weren't killed. They weren't murdered. They're just feared dead. We all know that there was a missile that hit. That you can report that, maybe you don't know the source of the missile. That's fine. But they were killed. They're not just dead. Whereas, if you look at the reporting from CBS News as well, it's the same news site of Israeli music festival massacre holds shocking remnants of horrific attack. So here we're talking about the bunch of the dead Israelis, but they were massacred. It was the site of the massacre, and there was a specific statement of the horrific attack. So as she was saying, the use of the language by this news site in particular clearly shows bias, because Palestinians are simply dead and Israelis were massacred. Now, I'm not being critical of them saying that Israelis are massacred. They were. It's correct to say that they were massacred, but you're using the passive voice to describe the Palestinian casualties as such, and instead of saying that Palestinians were dead, say that the Palestinians were killed. I mean, they shouldn't have been killed. It's a horrific thing that they were killed. It's terrible. It's a shame that they were killed. But say that they were killed. Don't use the passive voice to describe how they died, because when you do so, you're either consciously or unconsciously making a difference, a differentiation between the different types of people. And I know conservatives are probably going to watch this, Dan's being overly woke again, but no. Words have meaning, and how you use words affect cultural biases. It affects how you view the world. And if you constantly hear the way things are reported, and this is not just an isolated incident. This is not an isolated incident at all. So let's go back to Charleston, Dylan Roof, USA Today. This is going to be two different news sources, but 9 dead in shooting at black church in Charleston. Not 9 killed. 9 black people weren't killed. 9 dead. Again, not 9 killed, but 9 dead. The people that were killed were black people, but USA Today reported it as 9 dead. But remember what I said about how sometimes Jewish people, especially Ashkenazi Jews, get the benefit of white privilege except for when they don't? 11 killed in synagogue massacre, subject charge of 29 counts. So again, it happened to black people. The black people are simply dead. It happened to white Jews, Ashkenazi Jews. They were killed in a massacre. The language that we use is important. And is this purposeful? I don't know if it's purposeful in every part, but we should be more purposeful in the future on how we refer to people when bad things happen to them, to make sure that we are not discounting or devaluing the loss of life of marginalized people as compared to the loss of life of people of privilege. And that's the point that she was making, and I 100% agree with that point. And I've shown you several examples of that as well. Here's another one that I found. 3 people dead after gunmen targeted black people. No, 3 people weren't killed after gunmen targeted black people. 3 people dead. Again, you might think I'm being nitpicky, but I'm just saying that it is not. I'm sure you could probably go find some articles that say black people murdered, black people killed, and I want you to ignore the ones where it's like a black perpetrator on a black person. Ignore those, because in those circumstances they're probably more worried about saying that it was the person, talking about the person who was doing the murdering versus the victims. But the point that I'm trying to make should be clear, is that when we word things as we report them, and I could very well be guilty of this myself. I would have to go back and look and see how I talk about things. You could probably go back and find things that I've done in the past and say, oh, well, Dan, you did the same thing. And if you do, great. Point it out to me. I would love to see it, because I would love to see how I can better myself and how I can better my reporting of individuals and the harm that is done to them, especially when they're marginalized people. But the media and people, especially, like, I am trying to do this full time. I am trying to get this to be off the ground and successful and everything like that. But I am not a 100% full-time professional person in the media. I don't have a journalism degree. These people are journalists. These people should know better. These people should know about writing in active voice versus passive voice. These people should know how they are writing it, or their bosses should be able to edit their stuff. And the editor should look at what the reporters write and say, oh, well, maybe why didn't you use the active voice here instead of using the passive voice? Why are you writing this way about white victims and this way about marginalized people? There needs to be a more conscious effort to have a conscience. There needs to be a more conscious effort to have a conscience about these things, to be able to look at what happens to people and describe it equitably. Because when you don't do so, you help fuel the societal biases that exist. Because again, when it happens to a black person, they're just dead. When it happens to a white person, they were murdered, they were killed. Something happened to them, where if they're dead, it's something that perhaps you expected of them, as the language expert said. So agree, disagree, comments, put it in the comment section below. Remember to like and subscribe to the video, to the channel. Remember to like and subscribe. Remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and have a good day.